Not at all.
Okay.
Because I am so not political, you can't even believe it. And I'll tell you why. I know nothing about politics.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back. So today we're talking about Dr. Phil. And before you scroll past thinking this is going to be boring, trust me, it is not. This man sat down for an interview, came in swinging with all these big, confident claims about American culture, history, church, you name it, and got taken apart piece by piece without even realizing it was happening. And the wildest part, the whole time he's insisting he's not even political. Meanwhile, he literally explored running for Senate as a Republican. Like, come on, bro. We're going to break down exactly where his arguments fall flat, where he accidentally proved the opposite of what he was trying to say, and why this interview is honestly one of the most unintentionally revealing things I've seen in a while. Stick around till the end, because I've got some thoughts on what's actually underneath all of this, and it might not be what you expect.
I never really saw you as a guy who delved into political issues per se. You seem more willing, interested, and I must say, maybe more conservative than I thought you were. Is that a fair assessment?
Not at all.
Okay.
Because I am so not political, you can't even believe it. And I'll tell you why. I know nothing about politics. And I know why you say that. It sounds like it.
Right.
I talk about these things as cultural issues from a psychological, psychosocial standpoint, how they affect families and people. And they do overlap with some of the things that politicians talk about, but they talk about it from a political standpoint, funding standpoint, how they can get this bill or that bill through, couldn't care less. But I am interested in those issues in terms of how they impact families in their day-to-day pursuit of life and peace and being able to raise their family in a healthy environment. So there's a lot of overlap, but I don't talk about it from a political standpoint because I frankly don't know enough about the politics of it all.
That's
I'm just
interesting.
willing to admit that. I'm just willing to admit it. I don't think a lot of other people know either. I'm just willing to admit it. We've got people that are just trying to change some of the core values in America, core values of family, trying to rewrite history. And we've got people that are coming in saying, well, we want to change history, we want to change what kids are being taught in history, we want to change biology, we want to change all of the things that we have for 100 years had empirical data to support.
But tell me more about, I don't want to gloss over this. I really want to understand this. Changing history. Okay, what was the history that used to be taught that now has been changed by the tyranny of the fringe?
Well, pick an area. We can talk about biology, where we have always had two sexes.
But what about history? Now, just to pick history, not biology, because you said history, biology. What about history?
Well, there's a lot of history to biology, and you would be missing a big point to pretend that there's not historical biology. But if you want to talk about history, we can, not in biology, but just talk about the history of mankind.
Yeah.
We've got areas where they don't want to talk about slavery. We had one a group of people that wanted to start describing slavery in history books as involuntary relocation.
Right.
This was not involuntary relocation. This was slavery. And we've got people that are wanting to rename schools because people that were doing what were the mores and folkways of the times now would clearly be doing things against the law, certainly against mores and folkways, because they were slave owners at the time, are saying, well, now we have to tear down these statues, we have to rename these schools, and we don't want to teach about them. We have to learn from our mistakes as a society. We can't pretend those things didn't happen. They did happen. They were dark and ugly times in American history. We don't want to pretend those things weren't there.
So let me see if I understand,
crazy.
Because there's a bunch of stuff. So if I hear you correctly, you're not in agreement with those who want to minimize the tragedy and brutality of slavery, but you also want to keep the school names. If a school is named after a slave owner, you're also okay with that because it will remind us and we will learn from it. Am I understanding that correctly?
I think you're oversimplifying what I'm saying. What
Okay.
I'm saying is, if you're wanting to change American history to pretend that these people did not exist, and you want to measure them by today's yardstick rather than the yardstick at the time, that's what is referred to as presentism. And that's like saying, okay, you're going to drive through a neighborhood and the speed limit is 20. And you drive through that neighborhood doing 20, and then they come along and say, you know what, we're going to change the speed limit to 10, and we're going to give you a ticket for speeding when the speed limit was 20. It's now 10, but you weren't speeding when you were doing 20, but now it's 10. We're going to give you a retroactive ticket for doing what was acceptable at the time. That's called presentism. We're going to take what was done back at the time, pull it up into the current time, and condemn you for not knowing what was going to be acceptable 200 years later than when you did it. And I think that is really narcissistic and arrogant and rewriting history instead of letting people learn from the mistakes that were made in America and that we need to learn from so we don't make those mistakes again. I think we've seen church membership drop below the 50% mark for the first time in our country's history. And I think that that's a problem for a variety of reasons, and one of them being that that's one of the times that families tend to spend quality time together. It's time that they put their phones down. It's time that they usually got together and would go do something as a unit and focus on values that were constructive to the family. There was often meditation time involved. There was often discussions about what was discussed in church that day. They often had Sunday dinner together afterwards and spent quality time like they did no other time during the day. And I think it also is a product of our lessened birth rate, which has dropped because a lot of people join church when they have children because they want their child to be baptized or christened or whatever. And the fact that we've seen our birth rate drop to around 1.6 from 2.1, which is necessary to sustain our infrastructure right now, is a problem. And it seems that that's one of the main reasons that church membership has dropped off. There's fewer kids to go get baptized, christened, or whatever, so people have less reason to go to church, and that's a byproduct of the lesser birth rate.
All right, so let's get into it. I've watched this interview multiple times now, and every single time I come back to it, I find something new to cringe at. Dr. Phil walks into this thing like he's about to drop wisdom on everybody, throwing around these big cultural talking points. America is losing its values. History is being rewritten, the fringe is taking over, and he never once tells you who specifically is doing any of this. Just some mysterious shadowy group of people ruining everything. And that's actually a slick little trick, because if you stay vague enough, nobody can fact-check you. It's just vibes and fear with nothing concrete attached to it. Then when he gets pushed on the history stuff, watch how fast he tries to escape. He's asked point blank, okay, what history exactly is being changed? And the man immediately sprints to biology and starts talking about two sexes. David has to drag him back and say no. You said history, stick to history. So then Dr. Phil brings up this example of people trying to relabel slavery as involuntary relocation to soften it. And yeah, that's genuinely bad. except the people who actually got caught doing that were conservative state governments. Florida's own school curriculum under DeSantis suggested that enslaved people picked up useful skills. So Dr. Phil accidentally called out his own side and blamed it on the other one. He didn't even notice. He also pulls out this concept called presentism. Basically the idea that you shouldn't judge historical figures by today's standards. He uses it to argue against renaming schools named after slave owners. And his analogy is you're driving 20 miles per hour, then they change the speed limit to 10. So now they're ticketing you retroactively. But come on, a speed limit and the enslavement of millions of human beings are not in the same conversation. Not even close. And nobody is punishing these historical figures anyway. Renaming a school is just a community deciding who they want representing them on the front of a building. That's it. Nobody's being arrested. Nobody's being erased. It's called a choice. Then he moves on to church attendance, dropping below 50%, and acts like civilization is collapsing. But when you actually listen to his reasoning for why church matters, it boils down to families put their phones down and eat dinner together. That's his argument, which is fine, sure, but that's not an argument for religion. That's an argument for literally any shared weekly activity. A bowling league does the same thing. He accidentally made the case for community in general while thinking he was making the case for God. And then David points out that while church attendance has been going down, violent crime has also been going down at the same time. So the whole moral decay theory just doesn't hold up when you look at the actual numbers. Dr. Phil's response? He pivots to shoplifting. He just changes the subject entirely and starts talking about something completely different. That's not a counterargument. That's a man walking away from a conversation while still standing in the room. Here's what gets me most, though. Dr. Phil built his whole career on being the guy who looks people dead in the face and says, "How's that working for you?" He made millions confronting people who weren't being honest with themselves. But the second someone turns that same energy on him, he folds. He can't back up his claims. He promises lists he clearly doesn't have. He dodges the hard questions. The straight-talking truth-teller can't handle straight talk. And this "I'm not political" thing, I'm sorry, but that is genuinely one of the most dishonest parts of all of this. The man spent years slowly migrating onto conservative media, started using the exact phrases Republican politicians use, wrote a book that reads like a culture war playbook, and at one point was literally exploring a Senate run in Texas as a Republican. Not an independent, a Republican. And then looked at the camera and said he doesn't really do politics. At least people who openly claim a side are being straight with you. That kind of dishonesty about your own position is actually worse than just owning where you stand. The real irony is that his whole argument is about one side trying to force their values on everyone else. But then in the same breath, he's saying communities shouldn't be able to rename their own schools. Certain things shouldn't be taught to kids, and that challenging the status quo is an attack on America's soul. He's not defending freedom of thought. He's defending the specific version of America that he personally grew up comfortable in and calling any change to a crisis. Anyway, that's where I'm at on this one. I want to know what you think. Drop it in the comments below because this one's worth talking about.